the 1960s.
Manpower Development and Training Act. It was to deal with the problems of workers facing job displacement. The National Defense Education Act was to improve and strengthen American school systems and encourage students to continue education after high school. Some provisions included scholarships and loans to students. Earl Gideon versus Wainwright. Earl Gideon was charged in Florida State with the felony of breaking and entering. He appeared in court without a lawyer, so he requested that the court gave him one. Florida said that an attorney can only be appointed to poor defendants in capital cases. Gideon had to represent himself. He was found guilty and he was sentenced to 5 years. Gideon petitioned in Florida Supreme Court, arguing that the trial court's decision violated his constitutional right to be represented by counsel. Robert Kennedy was the U.S. Attorney General from 1961 to 1964. Kennedy fought organized crimes and worked for civil rights for African Americans. Robert sent federal troops to Oxford to enforce a U.S. Supreme Court order admitting the first black student, James Meredith. The suppression of Buddhists became known as the Buddhist crisis. President No Dien Diem didn't really ease the tension, but he promised reforms. The Job Corps is a residential program for low-income U.S. residents, usually around the age of 16 and 24, who were high school dropouts or if they needed training to gain employment. Medicare helped improve the health of older Americans. Miranda versus Arizona. Ernesto Miranda was arrested for rape, kidnapping, and robbery. He wasn't appointed an attorney, nor was he informed of his rights. He allegedly confessed to his crimes, so he was sentenced for 20 to 30 years. He appealed to the Arizona Supreme Court, stating that the police had unconstitutionally obtained his confession. Arizona court disagreed, so he turned to the U.S. Supreme Court. They ruled that Miranda's confession could not be introduced. Martin Luther King turned his efforts to registering African American voters in the South, so he led a march in Selma, Alabama. Martin has been arrested multiple times. In 1968, Martin Luther King has been shot by James Earl. Black Panthers. The group's purpose was to challenge the police with violence. In 1968, the group had about 2,000 members. They dressed in black berets and black leather jackets. They were founded after the death of Malcolm X. Daily life and art. The Beatles started the British invasion, and in a way, was how some people in the U.S. rebelled. The Vietnamese president was assassinated, which led to the Vietnam War. At the end of the month after the Vietnamese president was killed, Huxley, C.S. Lewis, JFK, all died at the same day. The Beatles and Hefner changed the game with rock and roll, and all the U.S. could rebel on with lottery, and they got rid of crew cut and button-down colors. All that was mostly caused by the revolution and the war and everything going on. And daily life for some meant, well, it was mostly like availability. Meant they would go out, do anything they want, and that was all also caused by the revolution and how the U.S. people were rebelling. Art. Pop art to some folks in the 60s meant that they weren't always boring, that they had a fun side, and it started in the UK but got around in the 60s in New York. Op art. Op art mostly started with this one painting of a zebra. It's meant to somewhat be like illusional, an art that contains movement. Minimalism, an extreme form of abstract art, made by simple geometric shapes. Feminist art mostly started for like women getting not a lot more rights, but more rights to do what men can do and what they could prove they can do, and that they could do not more than men, but exactly what they can do. Not exactly, but exactly. And which created more opportunities for them that they hadn't had before. Well, that's what the feminist art thing was for, to create more rights for them. Conceptual art, which would be like if a piece of art was finished, but before it was finished, it had more meaning to them when it's finished.
Technology 1960. The first video game console. The first computer mouse. Douglas Engelbart completely changed the way people interacted with computers when he invented a computer mouse in 1964. His creation was made from wood and had two ear wheels that sat perpendicular to one another so as to allow movement on one axis. When you moved the mouse, the horizontal wheel moved sideways and the vertical wheel slid along the surface. He filed for the patent in 1967 as the XY position indicator for a display system. Unix. In 1969, a group of employees from AT&T at the Bell Labs created one of the most popular and powerful operating system of the age, Unix. Ken Thompson, Dennis Ritchie, Brian Kernighan, Douglas McCroy, and Joe Osana were among the crew who sat down to develop Unix. On the PDP-7 name was derived from Multics, a project run in conjunction with several large companies including Bell Labs that failed to deliver on expectations. Dynamic random access memory, light emitting diodes. Science 1960s. Science in the 1960s included astronomy and space exploration, biology, computer science, mathematics, physics, and many more. The science writing of the 1950s and 60s reflected an optimistic age that technology could solve nearly every